At Thanksgiving dinner, my sister stood up and announced, "We voted and you're not family anymore." Everyone cheered. I laughed softly and said, "Then I guess you won't need this." I placed a folder on the table. The moment she opened it, she started screaming. The sound was guttural, primal. My father's face drained of color. My mother clutched her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. 3 months earlier, I'd been the family's invisible anchor. The daughter who worked 2 jobs to keep dad's failing business afloat. The sister who paid for my brother's rehab. The niece who funded my uncle's medical bills. They never asked, they demanded. And I gave, because that's what good daughters do. But silence has a way of breeding observation. While they celebrated birthdays I funded, vacations I financed, I started noticing the small cruelties. How they'd discuss my weight at dinner, how they'd laugh about my boring job, how my sister would roll her eyes when I spoke, dismissing years of sacrifice with theatrical sighs. The vote happened during a family meeting I wasn't invited to. My aunt let it slip over coffee, thinking I already knew. They decided I was too different, too distant, not really one of them anymore. My sister wanted to make it official at Thanksgiving, a public execution disguised as democracy. So I hired a forensic accountant. The folder contained 5 years of financial records. Every loan I'd given that was never repaid. Every bill I'd covered while they bought luxury cars. Every time my father's business account showed transfers to his mistress, the one my mother didn't know about. Every fraudulent use of my credit cards my brother thought I hadn't noticed. But the real revelation was the trust fund. My grandmother's estate, which they'd told me went bankrupt. $1.2 million, divided among them the month after her funeral. My sister bought a house. My parents renovated theirs. My brother paid off his gambling debts. I received a card that said, "Grandma would have wanted you to understand. Family takes care of each other." The screaming turned to accusations. My sister's voice cracked as she demanded to know where I got this information. My father stood, his chair screeching against hardwood. My mother's face twisted between rage and something that looked almost like shame. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. The only nice thing I owned that I'd actually bought for myself. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm not family anymore, which means I'm done being your ATM." The second folder is at my lawyer's office. It details every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature on loan documents, every instance of financial elder abuse against Grandma before she died. My uncle's face went white. He'd been the executor. "You have 48 hours to wire my inheritance to my account, plus interest. Otherwise, I file everything with the district attorney. I have recordings too. Sunday dinners are so much more interesting when you're wearing a wire." The table erupted. My brother lunged forward, but my father grabbed him. My mother started crying, suddenly playing victim. My sister's hands shook as she rifled through the pages, her perfect Thanksgiving tableau crumbling like the lies she'd built her life on. I picked up my coat, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of their expectations, their manipulations, their casual cruelty. It all lifted with each step toward the door. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. "I'm thankful I finally understand what family really means, and what it doesn't." My hand was on the doorknob when my father's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait." I turned. He was holding something I couldn't quite see, his expression unreadable. "Before you go, there's something you should know about your grandmother's real will, the one we found last week." My blood went cold. The room fell silent. Even my sister's theatrical sobbing ceased, replaced by a tension so thick it felt like breathing through gauze. Dad held a yellowed envelope, the kind with a wax seal that suggested formality, importance, secrets buried deep. "Real will?" I echoed, hating how my voice wavered. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't calculation or dismissal. It looked almost like regret. Almost. "Your grandmother had 2 wills," he said. "The one Uncle Raymond executed. That was the decoy. She knew we'd fight over money, knew what we'd become." His jaw tightened. "She left specific instructions with her estate attorney that this envelope only be opened if certain conditions were met." My uncle pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor with an ugly screech. "Don't," he warned. "Don't do this." But Dad was already opening it. "The condition," he continued, pulling out a single sheet of paper, "was if you ever formally separated yourself from the family, if you ever walked away." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the weight of what he was about to say crushing him. "She knew you would, eventually." My sister lunged for the paper, but Dad held it above her reach. "Sit down, Melissa." Melissa. My sister's name felt foreign on his tongue, like he'd just remembered she had one. She always got away with being sweetheart or princess. I was always just my name, sharp and utilitarian, something to be deployed when I needed correcting. I didn't move from my position by the door. "What does it say?" Dad cleared his throat and read, "To my granddaughter, who shares my name, who carries my stubbornness and my sight. If you're hearing this, you've finally seen them for what they are. Everything I told them I left behind is actually yours. The lake house in Oak Haven they think is owned by the trust? Yours. The investment portfolio they believe went to charity? Yours. The life insurance policy they told you didn't exist? Also yours. But most importantly, the letters." "What letters?" The question came from my mother, who had gone very still. Dad's hands shook slightly as he continued reading. "I kept every letter you wrote me from the time you learned cursive until the year before I died. Every confession about what they did to you. Every time you apologized for not being enough. Every moment you thought you were alone. You weren't. I saw everything, and I documented everything." The paper rustled in his hands. "My lawyer has instructions to provide you with copies of every document showing how your family systematically isolated you, used you, and attempted to erase your worth. Consider it insurance. Consider it justice. Consider it my way of saying I'm sorry I was too weak to stop them when I was alive." The silence that followed was suffocating. I thought of my grandmother, Evelyn Grace, the the woman I was named after. The way she'd hold my hand a little too tight when we'd visit, like she was trying to anchor me to something. The way she'd slip me $20 bills and whisper, "For your escape fund, darling." How she'd gotten quieter in her final year, her eyes sharp, but her words measured, like she was conserving energy for something important. She'd been planning this, watching, waiting. "There's more," Dad said quietly. His voice had taken on a hollow quality. "She left you a letter, private, but she left me one too." He pulled out a second sheet, this one in my grandmother's spidery handwriting. I recognized it from birthday cards and recipe notes. It says, "Robert, if you're reading this, your daughter has finally chosen herself. You taught her she had to earn love through sacrifice. I taught her she was worthy of it freely given. One of us was right. She knows which." My father folded the letter carefully, precisely, like it might disintegrate if handled roughly. When he looked at me, tears were streaming down his face. I'd never seen him cry. Not at funerals. Not during his business failures. Not ever. "I'm sorry," he said. "God, I'm so sorry. But apologies are easy. They cost nothing. They're the currency of people who want forgiveness without change." "The lake house," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Oh, Caven. That's the one you've been renting out for the past 3 years? The income you said was going to the family fund?" Dad nodded miserably. "And the investment portfolio? How much?" $2.8 million, my uncle muttered. "As of last quarter." The room spun. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks, eating ramen, wearing secondhand clothes so I could send them money, I'd actually been a millionaire. They'd stolen more than my inheritance. They'd stolen my choices, my time, my sense of self. My brother found his voice. "You can't just take everything. We had plans. Melissa's pregnant. She needs that money for the baby." I turned to my sister. Her hands were pressed against her still flat stomach, her face a mask of desperation. "You're pregnant?" 3 months, she whispered. "We were going to tell everyone tonight. After..." She trailed off, looking at the ruins of her announcement dinner. Something twisted in my chest. Not quite sympathy, but close. I remembered being young and scared and making decisions based on what I thought my family needed from me. But then I remembered the vote. The way she'd stood up, triumphant, and declared me exiled from my own bloodline. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "I hope you love your child enough to never make them earn it." My mother finally spoke. "You're really going to take everything? After all we've done for you?" The laugh that escaped me was sharp, bitter. "What have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. That's called the legal minimum for not having your children taken away by the state. That's not love. That's basic functioning. We gave you a home where I learned my worth was measured in how much I could give and how little I could take up space." I opened my purse and pulled out my phone, pulling up a recording app. "Should I play some highlights? How about Christmas 2 years ago when you told Aunt Patricia I'd let myself go and would probably die alone with cats? Or my 30th birthday when you spent dinner listing all the ways I'd disappointed you?" Mom's face flushed. "That's taken out of context. What context makes it okay to tell your daughter she's worthless? We never said worthless. You didn't have to." I could feel something breaking open inside me, years of swallowed words and suffocated rage. Every eye roll when I spoke, every interrupted story, every time you forgot my birthday but threw Melissa a surprise party, every family photo where I was cropped out before posting to social media, every vacation I wasn't invited to, every achievement you dismissed. You taught me I was worthless without ever saying the word. You're just mad I finally believed you." Melissa slammed her hands on the table. "This is insane. We're family. Families fight, but we don't destroy each other over petty grudges." "Petty?" The word hung in the air. "You held a vote to excommunicate me. You made t-shirts. I saw them in the coat closet. Family first, freeloaders never. You were going to wear matching shirts to announce my exile." My sister's face went white. She hadn't known I'd found those. "You want to talk about family?" I continued. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't make you feel like you're constantly one mistake away from abandonment. You taught me that love was conditional, that I had to perform to deserve basic respect. Well, congratulations. I learned the lesson, and now I'm withdrawing my performance." I looked at the will still clutched in my father's hands. "I want that. And I want the name of Grandma's attorney. Tonight." "You can't," my uncle started. "I can, and I will. You have 2 choices. Give me what's legally mine and we part ways quietly, or I add estate fraud to the list of charges I file Monday morning. Your choice. 48 hours. The drive home felt surreal. My hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline crashing through my system like a storm. I'd spent so many years making myself small, digestible, convenient. The version of myself that stood in that dining room and claimed her space felt like someone I'd only met in dreams. My apartment was a studio in a converted warehouse, the kind of place that cost too much for too little, but was all I could afford after sending most of my paycheck to them. The furniture was secondhand. The walls were bare. I'd never decorated because I'd never felt like I deserved the permanence of making somewhere beautiful. I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and stood in the center of the room, breathing. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Please, can we talk? Just us." I deleted it. Then another from my father. "The attorney's name is Dorothea Vance. Her office is in Millbrook. I'm texting you her number." I saved the contact information and sat on my thrift store couch, letting the evening wash over me. The grandmother I'd known had been quiet strength wrapped in floral dresses and the smell of vanilla. She'd taught me to bake bread, her hands guiding mine through the kneading, telling me stories about her own mother who'd crossed an ocean alone at 16. "Strong women run in our blood," she'd said, "but so does the burden of loving weak men." I'd been 12 and didn't understand. At 28, I understood perfectly. My phone buzzed again. This time, my aunt. "Your mother is having a panic attack. Are you happy?" I blocked the number. Then my brother. You're being selfish. Family is supposed to forgive. Blocked. My cousin Trenton, who I'd helped through college. This isn't you. What happened to the girl who always helped everyone? She died, I thought. She was murdered slowly, piece by people who loved what she could give but never who she was. I blocked him too. By midnight, I'd blocked 17 numbers. By 1 a.m., I'd opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion and decided this qualified. By 2 a.m., I was going through old photo albums, seeing with new eyes how I'd been erased. There I was at 10, standing at the edge of every family portrait, slightly out of focus. There at 15, cut out of the Christmas card photo entirely. At 18, my college graduation. I'd paid for my own ceremony attendance, my own cap and gown, and they'd come 2 hours late, missing my walk across the stage. The photos told a story I'd been too close to see. I wasn't the problem child, I was the scapegoat, the designated outsider who made everyone else feel like they belonged. I fell asleep on the couch with the photo album open on my chest, dreaming of lake houses and investment portfolios and a grandmother who'd loved me enough to weaponize her death on my behalf. Friday morning arrived with a hangover and 17 missed calls. I ignored them all and called Dorothea Vance instead. Her secretary answered on the second ring. Vance Legal Associates, how may I direct your call? My name is Evelyn Grace Ashford. I'm calling regarding my grandmother's estate. Evelyn Grace Ashford Sr. A pause. 1 moment, please. Classical music filled my ear. I paced my small apartment feeling like I was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. Miss Ashford, the voice that came on the line was warm, professional, with an undercurrent of something that sounded like relief. I've been hoping you'd call. My name is Dorothea Vance, and I was your grandmother's attorney for the last 15 years of her life. She spoke of you often. My throat tightened. She did? Constantly. You were her pride, though I suspect she never told you that directly. No, I whispered. She didn't. Your grandmother was a complicated woman. Brilliant, strategic, but deeply aware of her own failings. She told me once that she'd created the family dynamic that hurt you by being too passive when your father was young. She said she taught him that women existed to serve, and he taught your mother the same. And together, they taught your siblings that some people are more valuable than others. I sat down hard on my couch. She said that? She said much more. Would you be able to come to my office? There are documents you need to see, and this conversation would be better held in person. I can be there by noon. Perfect. I'll have everything prepared. The drive to Millbrook took 45 minutes through winding back roads lined with trees burning in autumn glory. I'd grown up in these mountains, but I'd never really seen them. I'd been too busy working, too busy trying to earn love that was never coming, too busy surviving to actually live. Dorothea Vance's office was in a converted Victorian house, all dark wood and stained glass. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled when I entered. Ms. Ashford? Ms. Vance is expecting you. Second floor, first door on your right. I climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier. What if this was another trap? What if my grandmother had been cruel in death the way my family was cruel in life? But when I opened the door, Dorothea Vance stood to greet me, and something in her face eased my fear. She was in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that assessed without judging. Evelyn, she said warmly, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. Her office was lined with law books and family photos. I noticed none of them were staged. They were candid shots of laughter and mess and real moments. The kind of photos my family never took. I've been your grandmother's attorney since you were 13, Dorothea began, gesturing for me to sit. She came to me after your 8th grade graduation. Do you remember that day? I frowned, vaguely. I got some academic award. You got 4 academic awards. Top of your class in every subject. Your grandmother attended? Your parents did not. The memory surfaced, sharp and painful. I'd stood on that stage, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, finding only my grandmother in the 3rd row, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. She came to my office the next day, Dorothea continued, and said she needed to make provisions. She said she'd finally seen clearly what she'd created, and she needed to make it right. We spent the next 15 years preparing for this moment. She pulled out a thick folder. Everything your father mentioned is true. The lake house, the investments, the insurance. It's all yours. But there's more. My heart hammered. More? Your grandmother didn't just leave you money. She left you evidence. She spent the last decade of her life documenting every instance of abuse, manipulation, and fraud your family committed. Not just against you, but against others. Against her. Dorothea opened the folder, revealing stacks of papers, photographs, and what looked like journal entries. She kept a detailed diary. Every conversation where they discussed how to handle you. Every time they forged your signature on a document. Every family meeting where they decided how to distribute money that was legally yours. She recorded Sunday dinners for 3 years. She wore a wire? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. She did, and she was remarkably thorough. Dorothea's smile was grim. Your grandmother was dying, and she knew it. The cancer had spread faster than anyone expected. She spent her final months building a case that would protect you long after she was gone. I thought of those last visits. How tired Grandma had looked. How she'd grip my hand and stare at me with an intensity that had frightened me. I'd thought it was pain. Now I understood it was purpose. There's something else, Dorothea said quietly. She pulled out a sealed envelope, my name written across it in my grandmother's handwriting. She left this for you. She asked that I give it to you privately after you'd learned the truth. My hands trembled as I took it. The paper was heavy, expensive, the kind used for important occasions. Would you like privacy to read it? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Dorothea stood gracefully. I'll be downstairs. Take all the time you need. When the door closed behind her, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, filled with my grandmother's elegant script. My darling Evelyn, If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've finally found the courage to walk away. I'm proud of you. I'm also sorry. I failed you. I saw what your father was becoming when he was just a boy, and I didn't stop it. I saw how he chose a wife who would reinforce his worst instincts, and I didn't intervene. I watched as they shaped your siblings into smaller versions of themselves, and I said nothing. By the time you were born, I'd become a coward. I told myself that small kindnesses were enough, that slipping you money and telling you that you were special would somehow counteract the damage being done daily. I was wrong. I should have fought for you. I should have taken you from that house and raised you myself. I should have exposed them years ago, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing access to you entirely. Afraid of proving that I was as weak as I felt. Afraid that if I acted, they'd ensure I never saw you again. So instead, I built you this. A weapon, a shield, a way to fight back when I no longer could. The money isn't the important part, though I hope it gives you the freedom you deserve. The real inheritance is the truth, the documentation of every crime, every cruelty, every moment they tried to make you less than you are. You have the power now. You can prosecute, you can expose them, you can destroy them the way they tried to destroy you, or you can walk away, take what's yours, and build a life they can never touch. Whatever you choose, know this. You were never the problem. You were never too sensitive, too difficult, too much. You were a bright, sensitive soul born into a family that had forgotten how to love without conditions. I see you, Evelyn. I always have. And I love you. Not for what you can give, but for who you are. Be free, my darling. Be ferociously, unapologetically free. All my love, Grandma. I read it 3 times before the tears came. They were hot and angry and sad all at once, grieving not just for what I'd lost, but for what could have been if just one person had been brave enough to act sooner. But Grandma had acted. Late. But she'd acted, and now I had choices. I wiped my face and went downstairs. Dorothea was waiting in a sitting room with tea prepared. Are you all right? She asked gently. No, I said honestly, but I will be. She nodded. What would you like to do? I want everything, the properties, the investments, all of it. And I want copies of every piece of evidence. And the family? Do you want to pursue legal action? I thought of my sister's pregnancy, my brother's addiction, my father's tears, my mother's panic attack. I want them to know I could, I said finally. I want them to live with the understanding that their freedom is a gift I'm choosing to give them, not a right they're entitled to. But I don't want to destroy them. I just want to be free of them. Dorothea's smile was approving. Your grandmother thought you'd say something like that. She left one more thing, a letter to be delivered to your family. It explains what you have access to and makes it clear that any attempt to contact you, harass you, or interfere with your inheritance will result in immediate legal action. It essentially functions as a restraining order without needing to go through the courts. Send it, I said. Today. We spent the next 3 hours going through paperwork. I signed documents transferring property titles, investment accounts, and insurance policies into my name. I made copies of the evidence files. I set up new bank accounts that my family couldn't access. By the time I left Dorothea's office, the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. I sat in my car for a long moment, feeling the weight of what had just happened. I was wealthy. I was free. I was utterly, completely alone. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Calista, Melissa's best friend. She asked me to reach out. She's in the hospital, bleeding. She's scared she's losing the baby. She's asking for you. I stared at the message, feeling nothing at first. Then slowly, something that might have been sympathy, or might have been the last dying embers of obligation. I typed back, which hospital? Mercy General, room 412. I shouldn't go. I knew I shouldn't go. This was probably a trap, another manipulation, another attempt to pull me back into their orbit. But I thought of my sister at 7, before she'd learned to perform for our parents. How she'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, terrified of the dark. How I'd held her and promised nothing bad would happen while I was there. We'd both been children once, before we'd learned our roles, before I'd become the giver and she'd become the taker. I drove to the hospital. Mercy General was where I'd been born, where my brother had gotten his stomach pumped after a party gone wrong, where my father had been treated after his heart attack scare that turned out to be acid reflux. The building held the architecture of our family's pain. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, my heart hammering. The nurse at the station pointed me toward room 412 without asking questions. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear voices inside. My mother's nervous chatter, my brother's deeper tones. I almost turned around. Then I heard Melissa crying. I pushed the door open. The room fell silent. My mother stood by the window, looking like she hadn't slept. My brother was in the corner, arms crossed defensively, and Melissa was in the bed, hooked up to an IV, her face pale and streaked with tears. You came, she whispered. I shouldn't have, I said honestly. But I did. My mother stepped forward. Evelyn, don't. I held up my hand. I'm not here for you. I'm here to see if my sister is okay, and then I'm leaving. She's been bleeding, Mom said, her voice breaking. They're running tests. They don't know if the baby... She couldn't finish. I looked at Melissa, really looked at her. She looked young suddenly, stripped of her usual polish and performance. She looked scared. Are you in pain? I asked. She nodded. They gave me something, but it's not working very well. I moved to the chair beside her bed, careful not to touch anything. What did the doctor say? That it could be nothing, or it could be something serious. They won't know for a few hours. Her hand moved to her stomach protectively. I'm so scared. I know. I'm sorry. The words came out in a rush. I'm sorry for the vote, for the shirts, for everything. I was so jealous of you. I blinked. Jealous? Of me? You were always Dad's favorite, even if he never showed it. You were smart and capable, and you didn't need anyone. She trailed off. I was just pretty. That's all I had. And even that wasn't enough to make them look at me the way they looked at you when they needed something. The observation was so skewed from reality that I almost laughed, but there was real pain in her voice. That's not how I experienced it, I said carefully. From where I stood, you were the beloved princess, and I was the ATM. You were useful. I was decorative. At least being useful mattered. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing how differently we'd lived in the same house, under the same roof, in the same family. I can't forgive you, I said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did at Thanksgiving, that was cruel, calculated. That wasn't jealousy, that was malice. I know. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I wanted to hurt you the way I hurt. I wanted you to feel as small as I felt, but I was pregnant and scared, and I thought if I could prove I was important enough to exile you, then maybe I'd finally matter. You could have just talked to me. Would you have listened? I wanted to say yes, but honesty was all I had left. Probably not. I was so busy being angry at all of you that I'd stopped seeing any of you as individuals. You were just them, the family who used me. My brother cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I didn't want to do the vote. I told her it was stupid. I looked at him, Darren, who'd been funny as a kid before the drugs, who'd once built me a treehouse and taught me to throw a football. But you didn't stop it. No, he admitted. I didn't. Why? He shrugged helplessly. Because I'm weak. Because it was easier to go along than to stand up. Because I've been selfish my whole life and I don't know how to be anything else. The honesty was startling. My family didn't do honest. They did performance and manipulation and carefully crafted narratives. I'm not giving the money back, I said to the room, and I'm not rejoining the family. Whatever happens with the baby, whatever happens next, I'm done being your solution to every problem you create for yourselves. We know, my mother said quietly. She'd moved to stand at the foot of Melissa's bed, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Dorothea sent the letter. We know what you have, what you could do, and we're not going to fight you. Your father already started the wire transfer. The full amount, plus interest like you demanded. I nodded. Good. But Evelyn, Mom continued, her voice trembling, we're still your family. Blood doesn't just stop meaning something because we hurt you. Oh, you're right, I said. Blood doesn't stop meaning something, but it also doesn't mean I have to keep bleeding for you. A doctor knocked and entered. A woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a kind smile. Melissa, I have your test results. My sister grabbed my hand instinctively. I let her. The bleeding has stopped, the doctor said. The ultrasound looks good. Baby's heartbeat is strong. It appears to have been a subchorionic hemorrhage. Scary, but not uncommon in early pregnancy. With bed rest and careful monitoring, you should be fine. The relief in the room was palpable. Melissa started crying again, but this time from relief. My mother made a sound like a sob. My brother slumped against the wall. Thank God, Melissa whispered, still gripping my hand. Thank God. I gently extracted my hand from. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad the baby's okay. Will you stay? She asked. Just for a little while? I looked at her. My sister who'd voted me out of the family, who'd made t-shirts to celebrate my exile, who'd spent years rolling her eyes at my existence. But I also saw the 7-year-old who'd been afraid of thunder, the teenager who'd cried in my room after her first heartbreak. The person she'd been before our family had twisted us both into shapes that barely fit. I'll stay until you fall asleep, I said. Then I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. Okay, she whispered. That's okay. I stayed for 2 hours. We didn't talk about the inheritance or the evidence or the years of accumulated pain. We talked about small things, baby names she was considering, the nursery she wanted to paint, her fears about becoming a mother. I don't want to be like them, she said quietly as the pain medication made her drowsy. Like Mom and Dad. I don't want my kid to grow up feeling worthless. Then don't make them earn your love, I said. Love them because they exist, not because of what they can do for you. Will you? She started, then stopped. Never mind. What? Will you teach me how to be different? I thought about it. About whether I could separate the sister from the family, the person from the pattern. About whether I had the emotional bandwidth to try. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe, after some time passes, after I figure out who I am without all of you. She nodded sleepily. That's fair. When her breathing evened out in sleep, I stood carefully. My mother and brother had left an hour earlier, giving us space. It was just me and my sleeping sister and all the history we couldn't undo. I left without saying goodbye. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork and logistics. I closed on the lake house, a sprawling property on 40 acres with a private beach and a view that made my chest ache. I met with financial advisors who helped me understand the investment portfolio Grandma had built. I quit both my jobs with 2 weeks' notice, professionally and without drama. My former employers were shocked. I'd been Employee of the Month so many times they'd created a special plaque just for me. They asked what I'd be doing next. Living, I told them. Just living. I sold my furniture, packed my few belongings, and moved into the lake house. It was November now. The tourists gone. The lake quiet. The house had been updated recently, probably with family fund money that was actually mine, and it was beautiful. Hardwood floors, stone fireplaces, walls of windows looking out at the water. It was also massive and empty and echoing with silence. I spent the first night sitting on the deck, wrapped in a blanket, watching the moonlight on the water. I kept waiting to feel triumphant, victorious, free. Instead, I felt hollow. I'd won. I'd escaped. I had more money than I'd ever dreamed of, a house that belonged in magazines, and the proof of every crime my family had committed against me. I had everything I'd fought for, and I'd never felt more alone. My phone buzzed. A text from Darren. Melissa went home today. Baby's fine. She wanted you to know. I didn't respond. Another text from an unknown number. Hi, this is Trenton. I know you blocked me, but I borrowed my girlfriend's phone. I just wanted to say I looked through my finances and I found records of all the money you loaned me for school. I'm setting up a payment plan to pay you back. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. You don't have to pay me back. Consider it a graduation gift. Just be better than they taught us to be. His response came quickly. Thank you. I will. I promise. I set my phone down and went inside. The master bedroom had a fireplace and a bed that could sleep 4 people. I'd bought new sheets. The first time I'd ever bought myself anything that nice. But they felt too crisp, too perfect, too much. I lay in the center of the enormous bed and felt like I was floating in space. This was freedom. This was what I'd fought for. So why did it feel like grief? I must have fallen asleep because I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and my phone ringing. It was Dorothea. Good morning, she said cheerfully. How's the lake house? Big, I said groggily. Really big. Your grandmother loved that place. She bought it 30 years ago with money she'd saved in secret from your grandfather. It was her escape. Did she come here often? Every chance she got. Especially in her last years. Dorothea paused. There's something in the basement you should see. Your grandmother left specific instructions for me to tell you about it only after you'd spent a night in the house. What is it? I think you should see it yourself. It's behind the bookshelf in the southwest corner. There's a small latch hidden behind the 3rd shelf. Pull it. My curiosity piqued. I got up and found my way to the basement. It was finished, with a game room and a small library. The bookshelf Dorothea mentioned was in the corner, filled with what looked like romance novels. I found the latch and pulled. The bookshelf swung open like something out of a movie, revealing a small room. Inside was a studio, an art studio. Canvases lined the walls, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And every single one was a painting of me at 5, laughing in a sunflower field. Me at 13, reading under a tree. Me at 20, looking tired but determined. Me at 25, the exhaustion etched into every brushstroke. My grandmother had painted me, had seen me, had documented my life through her eyes in a way my family never had. But it was the final canvas that broke me. It showed me as I was now, standing on a dock at sunset, my back to the viewer, my shoulders straight, my head held high, and written in small letters in the corner, finally free. She'd painted my future before she died. She'd believed I'd make it here. I sank to the floor among the canvases and cried. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and untouchable. I cried for the grandmother who'd loved me silently, for the girl I'd been who'd thought she was unlovable, for the woman I was becoming who had to learn that freedom meant loneliness before it meant peace. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood, I felt different, lighter, like I'd been carrying something I hadn't known was there, and it had finally dissolved. I called Dorothea back. She painted me. She did, every Sunday for years. She said it was how she kept you close when your family kept you distant. Why didn't she just tell me? Why all the secrecy? Because she was afraid. Afraid that if she intervened directly, they'd cut her off from you completely. Afraid that her actions would make things worse. She chose documentation and preparation over confrontation. Whether that was right or wrong, Dorothea trailed off. I think she struggled with that question until the day she died. She should have fought harder, I said, but there was no heat in it. Only sadness, perhaps. But she fought the best way she knew how. And in the end, she made sure you'd have what you needed to fight for yourself. We talked for a few more minutes about estate details and legal logistics. When I hung up, I went back to the studio and really looked at the paintings. My grandmother had seen me. Not the version I performed for my family, not the exhausted caretaker or the dismissed daughter. She'd seen the me underneath, the girl who loved sunflowers, who read too much, who had fire in her eyes even when she was tired. I thought about what to do with this room, this shrine to a love that had been real but hidden. I could close it back up, preserve it like a museum. I could sell the paintings, monetize the only pure thing I'd ever been given, or I could paint my own. I found art supplies in a closet, oil paints, brushes, canvases, everything new and high quality, like Grandma had been preparing the space for me. I set up a canvas and stood before it, brush in hand, with no idea what to create. Then I began to paint. I painted the lake at sunset, the view from my bedroom window, the way the light hit the water and made it look like liquid gold. I painted for hours, losing track of time, finding a kind of meditation in the movement of brush against canvas. I wasn't good. The proportions were wrong, the colors muddy, but it was mine. Created from something that wasn't obligation or fear or the need to prove my worth. It was just creation, for its own sake. When I finally stopped, the sun had set and the studio was dark except for the small lamp in the corner. My back ached and my hands were cramped, but I felt more present in my body than I had in years. I took a picture of the painting and sent it to Dorothea with the message, found the studio, found myself, thank you. Her response was immediate. Your grandmother would be so proud. Winter came to the lake house slowly, then all at once. The tourists disappeared entirely. The other houses on the lake closed up for the season. It was just me and the water and the silence. I spent my days painting, reading, and learning to cook elaborate meals for one. I spent my nights by the fire, writing in a journal Dorothea had given me. Your grandmother kept journals, she'd said. Perhaps you'd like to continue the tradition. So I wrote. About my family, about the abuse I hadn't named while living through it, about the slow erosion of self that happens when you're raised to believe your worth is transactional. I wrote about my grandmother too, about wishing I'd known her better, about being angry at her for not fighting sooner, then forgiving her for being human, about understanding that we all do the best we can with the courage we have. By January, I'd written 3 full journals and painted 20 canvases. I'd also gone 3 months without speaking to anyone from my family. The money from the wire transfer sat in my account, growing interest. I hadn't touched it. I'd used the investment portfolio for living expenses, working with a financial advisor to ensure I'd never have to worry about money again. I donated heavily to organizations that helped abused children, that supported women leaving difficult situations, that provided resources for people trying to escape toxic families. I did it anonymously, not wanting recognition, just wanting to turn my pain into something useful. One morning in late January, I woke to find my driveway blocked by a car I didn't recognize. My first instinct was panic. Had my family found me? But then I saw the woman emerging from the driver's side. She was tall and black, probably in her 50s, with locks pinned up in an elegant twist and a warm smile. She waved when she saw me watching from the window. I grabbed a jacket and went outside, curious and cautious. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she said, her voice melodic and gentle. "My name is Dr. Imani Okonkwo. I'm a therapist who specializes in family trauma and recovery. Dorothea Vance sent me." I frowned. "I didn't ask for a therapist." "You didn't. But your grandmother did. She left instructions that if you took possession of the lake house and stayed for more than 2 months, I was to reach out. She prepaid for a year of sessions, if you're interested." Of course she did. Even in death, Grandma was orchestrating my healing. "What if I'm not interested?" I asked, though I was. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. "Then I'll leave, and you'll have lost nothing but 10 minutes of your morning. But if you are interested, I practice in town 3 days a week. I also make house calls for clients who prefer privacy. Your grandmother thought you might prefer the latter." I looked at this woman who'd driven out here in January to offer me something I didn't know I needed. "Do you make coffee?" Her smile widened. "I make excellent coffee." We sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about nothing important. The weather, the lake, how the ice was already starting to form near the shore. She didn't push, didn't prod, just existed comfortably in my space. Finally, I asked, "Did you know my grandmother?" I did. She was my client for the last 5 years of her life. She came to me because she was struggling with guilt about you, about the ways she'd failed to protect you. Dr. Okonkwo set down her mug. She spent our sessions working through her own trauma, her marriage, the way she'd raised your father, the patterns she'd created. She wanted to break those patterns, but she didn't know how. So she decided to give you the tools to break them yourself. The money, the evidence, this house, and therapy. She knew that escaping was only the first step. Healing would be the harder journey. "I'm not sure I want to heal," I admitted. "Being angry gives me purpose. If I let go of the anger, what's left? Let's find out," Dr. Okonkwo said gently. And so began the hardest work I'd ever done. Twice a week, Dr. Okonkwo came to the lake house and we talked. Sometimes we sat in the living room by the fire. Sometimes we walked along the frozen lake shore. Sometimes we painted together in Grandma's studio, working through feelings too big for words. She helped me name things I'd never had language for. Emotional incest, the way my parents had made me responsible for their emotional needs. Parentification, how I'd been forced to act as parent to my siblings from a young age. Scapegoating, the family dynamic where I was blamed for problems I didn't create. She helped me see that my family hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my sense of self, my ability to trust, my understanding of what love should look like. "You learned that love is transactional," Dr. Okonkwo said during one session, "that you have to earn it through service, that your worth is measured in what you can give, not who you are." How do I unlearn that? By giving yourself the unconditional love you never received. By learning to value yourself without productivity or performance. By understanding that your worthiness is inherent, not earned. It sounded impossible, but I tried. I started small. I bought myself flowers just because they were pretty. I took days off from painting just to read. I said no to requests from charities not because I didn't want to give, but because I needed to learn that my resources weren't endless. I practiced setting boundaries with no one but myself, learning the shape of my own limits. And slowly, painfully, I began to heal. By March, I'd been at the lake house for 4 months. The ice was starting to break up, water pooling on the surface. I watched from my deck as the world began to thaw. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Baby's here. Girl." Named her Evelyn. "Hope that's okay?" I stared at the message, feeling a complex tangle of emotions. Honored, manipulated, sad, angry, hopeful. I showed the text to Dr. Okonkwo during our next session. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me thinks it's beautiful. Part of me thinks she's trying to use a baby to pull me back in. Can both be true?" I thought about it. Yes. She can genuinely want me in her daughter's life and also be manipulating me. Humans are complex. They are. So what do you want to do? I don't know that either. That's okay. You don't have to know yet. I didn't respond to the text, but I thought about it. About a baby girl somewhere carrying my name, my grandmother's name. About whether that baby would grow up loved or used. About whether I had any responsibility to intervene. In April, Dorothea called. "Your family's lawyer reached out. They want to negotiate a settlement." A settlement for what? They already gave me what was legally mine. They want to buy your silence. They're offering an additional $500,000 if you'll sign an NDA about the evidence you have. I laughed. They think they can buy my silence after stealing my inheritance? Apparently. What should I tell them? I thought about the recordings, the documents, the proof of their fraud. I thought about how easy it would be to expose them, to destroy their reputations, to make them feel as small as they'd made me feel. I thought about my grandmother's letter. "You can destroy them the way they tried to destroy you, or you can walk away." "Tell them no," I said. "Tell them the evidence exists as insurance, not as ammunition. As long as they leave me alone, it stays private. If they ever contact me, harass me, or try to interfere with my life again, I'll release everything. Those are the only terms." "You're sure? That's a lot of money." "I have enough money. What I need is peace." Dorothea was quiet for a moment. "Your grandmother would be very proud of you." "I hope so," I said, and realized I meant it. May brought warmth and the return of life to the lake. Boats appeared on the water. The other houses opened up. Neighbors waved and smiled, respecting my privacy but offering casual friendliness. I started going into town more often. I joined a painting class at the community center. I volunteered at the library. I went to farmers markets and learned the names of the vendors. I was building a life, not running from my old one. I'd done that, but actively creating something new. One evening, I was at a coffee shop in town when a woman approached my table. She was younger than me, maybe 23 or 24, with nervous eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I've seen you around town and I needed to ask someone." She took a deep breath. "How did you do it?" "Do what?" "Leave. Start over. I see you and you seem so free. I want that, but I don't know how." I looked at this young woman, seeing myself in her uncertainty, and felt something shift in my chest. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Tell me what's happening." Her name was Willow. She was trapped in a relationship with a man who didn't hit her but controlled every aspect of her life. Her family sided with him, told her she was lucky to have someone who cared so much. She had no money, no job, nowhere to go. "I feel crazy," she whispered. "Like maybe they're right, and I'm just being dramatic." "You're not crazy," I said firmly. "And you're not dramatic. Trust that feeling that something's wrong." We talked for 2 hours. I told her about resources, shelters, legal aid. I gave her the number of Dr. Okonkwo's practice. I didn't tell her my story, it wasn't about me, but I tried to give her what I'd needed, someone who believed me. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." I watched her walk away and felt purpose settling into my bones. Not the old purpose of giving until I was empty, but something new, something sustainable. Maybe this was what Grandma had wanted. Not just for me to escape, but for me to heal enough to help others escape too. I called Dorothea the next day. I want to start a foundation for people leaving toxic family situations, for people who need resources to rebuild. "That's a wonderful idea. Let me put you in touch with some people who can help set that up." By July, the Evelyn Grace Foundation was official. I donated a third of the investment portfolio to fund it. We offered financial assistance, legal support, therapy resources, and temporary housing for people escaping abusive family situations. The first person we helped was Willow. She moved into a small apartment we secured for her, started therapy, and began training to become a paralegal. The second was a 60-year-old man whose adult children had been financially abusing him. The third was a teenager whose parents were using her college fund to support her brother's gambling addiction. We helped them all. And in helping them, I found a purpose that didn't require my self-destruction. August marked a year since the Thanksgiving that changed everything. The anniversary arrived without fanfare, just another warm summer day at the lake. I was painting on the deck when my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. "Hello? Evelyn?" A familiar voice, older and tired. "It's Uncle Raymond." I tensed. "How did you get this number?" "From the phone book. Your house is listed." He paused. "I'm not calling to cause trouble. I wanted to tell you something before I die." "You're dying?" "Lung cancer. Stage 4. They give me maybe 3 months." I felt a flash of something, not quite sympathy, but not indifference either. Uncle Raymond had been the executor who'd helped steal my inheritance, but he'd also been the one who'd taught me to fish, who'd let me hide in his workshop when I needed quiet. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm calling to apologize. For the estate, for letting your father manipulate me into executing the false will, for being too weak to do the right thing. Why are you telling me this now? Because I can't die knowing I never said it. Because you deserved better. Because your grandmother told me before she died that I was the worst kind of coward." She was right. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession hanging between us. "What happened to her?" he continued. "What we did to her in those last months, that was evil. She was in pain, begging for medication, and we withheld it unless she signed documents. I participated in that. I watched her suffer because your father said it was necessary for the family." My stomach turned. I'd known they'd manipulated her, but this, "You tortured a dying woman." "Yes," his voice broke. "We did, and I have to live with that for whatever time I have left." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you have evidence of financial crimes, but not this. And you should know. You should know what they're capable of. What I'm capable of." He coughed, the sound wet and painful. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. Does my father know you're calling me?" "No. He'd be furious, but I don't care anymore. Fear of your father's anger seems pretty insignificant when you're dying." "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "I don't forgive you, but I appreciate the honesty. That's more than I deserve." Another wet cough. "For what it's worth, your grandmother was proud of you. She told me so the last time I saw her. She said you were the only one of us who had a chance at being a decent human being." "She was right," I said, not unkindly. After we hung up, I sat on the deck for a long time, processing. Uncle Raymond would be dead by fall. My grandmother's suffering had been worse than I'd imagined. And somewhere in that revelation was a choice. I could let this new knowledge reopen old wounds, or I could hold it as proof that leaving had been right. I called Dr. Okonkwo. "Something happened," I said when she answered. "And I need to talk through it before I decide what to do. I'm in town. Can you meet me at the office in an hour?" We spent the session processing the revelation, exploring my feelings about Uncle Raymond's confession. By the end, I'd reached a decision. "I'm not going to use this information," I told Dr. Okonkwo. "I'm not going to pursue charges for elder abuse. Uncle Raymond is dying, and revenge won't undo what happened to Grandma. That's a very mature decision. It's not maturity. It's self-preservation. Every minute I spend seeking revenge is a minute I'm not spending building my life. And Grandma didn't leave me all that evidence so I'd be consumed by it. She left it so I'd be protected by it. You've come a long way, Dr. Okonkwo said with genuine warmth. I have, but I'm not done yet. September arrived with the first hints of autumn. I'd been at the lake house for almost a year. The foundation was thriving, helping dozens of people rebuild their lives. I'd completed 50 paintings, written 7 journals, and learned to sleep through the night without nightmares. I was different. Not healed. I wasn't sure that was possible, but transformed. I'd learned to set boundaries, to value myself, to understand that worthiness wasn't something you earned but something you inherently possessed. One evening I was working in the studio when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Melissa. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I had to try. Baby Evelyn is turning 5 months old tomorrow. I've been in therapy, working on myself, trying to understand why I did what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. But if you ever want to meet her, the door is open. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I showed it to Dr. Okonkwo during our next session. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Part of me is curious. Part of me thinks it's a trap. What would meeting her cost you? I thought about it. Emotional energy. The risk of getting pulled back into their dynamics. But also, nothing I couldn't recover from. I'm stronger now. I have boundaries. I could see the baby and leave without getting entangled. That's true. You're not the same person who left that Thanksgiving dinner. No, I agreed. I'm not. I thought about it for another week. Then I texted Melissa back. I'm willing to meet your daughter, but not at your house. Not with the family there. Just you, the baby, and neutral territory. Take it or leave it. Her response was immediate. Thank you. Yes, anywhere you want. We met at a park midway between her city and my lake house. It was a crisp October morning, leaves falling like golden snow. I arrived first, sitting on a bench, watching children play on the swings. Then I saw Melissa approaching with a stroller. She looked different. Tired, softer somehow, less performative. Motherhood had changed her. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, sitting beside me. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. She nodded and carefully lifted a bundle from the stroller. Baby Evelyn was tiny and perfect, with dark eyes and a shock of black hair. She looked at me with the serious expression babies sometimes have, like they're contemplating the nature of existence. Hi, I whispered to her. I'm your aunt. Or I was. Or, I don't know what I am. You're whatever you want to be, Melissa said. I'm not making demands. I wanted you to meet her, and I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not performatively sorry. Not because I want something, but because I've been sitting with what I did, and it was unforgivable. I looked at my sister. You're right. It was unforgivable. I know. So why did you do it? Melissa was quiet for a moment, her hand gently rocking the baby. Because I was jealous and cruel, and I wanted to hurt you. Because I've always felt like nothing I did mattered to them, and the one thing I could do was be better than you at something. And that something became cruelty. That's honest, I said. Therapy is a bitch, she said with a sad smile. It makes you face things about yourself that are really ugly. We sat in silence, watching the leaves fall. Baby Evelyn started to fuss, and Melissa expertly soothed her. Do you want to hold her? Melissa asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She carefully transferred the baby to my arms. She was so light, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on the people around her to teach her about love and worth and belonging. Don't mess her up, I said to Melissa. Don't teach her that love is conditional. Don't make her earn your affection. Don't compare her to other people and find her lacking. I'm trying not to, Melissa said quietly. That's why I'm in therapy. That's why I named her after you. To remind myself every day of the person I hurt, the patterns I need to break. Using your daughter as a reminder of your guilt seems problematic, I observed. That's what my therapist said too, Melissa admitted. But it's more than that. I named her after you because you're the strongest person I know, because you broke the cycle, because I want her to have your strength, not my weakness. I looked down at baby Evelyn, who had grabbed my finger with her tiny fist. She was innocent of all of this. She didn't know about votes or t-shirts or stolen inheritances. She just knew she was being held and she was safe. I can't be her aunt, I said finally. Not in the traditional way. I can't come to family dinners or birthday parties with them there. I can't pretend everything is fine. I understand. But maybe, I paused, thinking, maybe I could be someone who sends her birthday gifts. Someone who's there if she ever needs an escape. Someone who tells her the truth if she asks. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that. Thank you. We sat for another hour, talking carefully around the wounds that were still too fresh. She told me about her therapy, about how she was working through her own relationship with our parents, about how she was trying to build something different for her daughter. I told her about the foundation, about my painting, about the life I'd built in solitude. We didn't hug when we parted. We didn't make promises about the future, but we exchanged phone numbers, and there was a fragile understanding between us. As I drove back to the lake house, I thought about baby Evelyn, about how she'd enter a world that was still broken, a family that was still learning how to love without conditions. But maybe that was enough. Maybe we didn't have to fix everything all at once. Maybe healing happened in small increments, one generation trying to be slightly better than the last. November came again, a full year since that Thanksgiving dinner that had split my life into before and after. I woke up on Thanksgiving morning and decided to host a dinner. Not for my biological family, but for the family I'd chosen. I invited Dorothea and her wife, Dr. Okonkwo and her teenage daughter, Willow, who'd been thriving in her new life, 3 other people who'd been helped by the foundation and had become friends. We gathered around the table in the lake house, a mismatched group of survivors and healers, people who understood that family was something you built, not something you were born into. Before we ate, Dorothea raised her glass. To Evelyn Grace, both of them. To women who love fiercely enough to plan their revenge from beyond the grave. And to all of us, who are learning that family is about showing up, not showing off. We drank to that. And as I looked around the table at these people who saw me, really saw me, I felt something I'd never felt at a family dinner before. I felt like I belonged. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Evelyn Grace Foundation now operates in 12 states. We've helped over 3,000 people escape toxic situations and rebuild their lives. We've expanded to include legal services, educational scholarships, and a mentorship program. I'm on the board of directors, but I'm not the CEO. I learned that running a foundation isn't the same as healing from trauma, and I needed to do both. I'm 33 now. I've been in a relationship for 2 years with a woman named Autumn who teaches environmental science and doesn't care about my family's money. She loves me for the paintings I create, the way I laugh at terrible puns, and my tendency to rescue injured birds. I still see Dr. Okonkwo monthly, not because I'm broken, but because therapy is how I maintain my mental health, like taking vitamins but for your soul. I've seen baby Evelyn, now 5-year-old Evelyn, a handful of times. She's bright and funny and asks a million questions. Melissa has kept her promise. She's breaking the patterns. It's not perfect, but it's different. I haven't spoken to my parents in 5 years. My brother reached out once, asking for money for another rehab. I sent him information about the foundation's scholarship program and told him I believed he could recover, but I couldn't be his solution. I haven't heard from him since. Uncle Raymond died 4 years ago. I didn't go to the funeral, but I sent flowers, white lilies, grandmother's favorite. My father sent me a letter on my 30th birthday. It was long and rambling and full of half apologies and justifications. I read it once, then filed it with all the other evidence and never responded. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd stayed. If I'd kept giving and sacrificing and making myself small. If I'd believed the vote and accepted my exile as truth. But then I walk through my lake house, past the studio filled with paintings, past the photos of people I've helped, past Autumn sleeping in our bed, and I know I would have died. Not physically, maybe. But the essential part of me, the part that was curious and creative and capable of joy, would have been slowly eroded until nothing remained but the shell of service. I'm painting in the studio when Autumn comes down with coffee. Still working on that piece? I step back to look at the canvas. It's a self-portrait, but not the kind my grandmother painted. This one shows me as I am now, standing in the lake house, surrounded by light, my hands creating rather than giving. Almost done, I say. She kisses my temple. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. And for the first time in my life, I believe it. My worth isn't measured in what I can give. It's not earned through sacrifice or service or making myself convenient for others. It's inherent. It's mine. It's unshakable. That's what my grandmother's reel will gave me. Not money or property or evidence, though those helped. She gave me permission to choose myself, and I did. Every day, I choose myself, and that finally feels like freedom.